New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought Today. It happens every Tuesday here on the New Thought Media Network, an opportunity for Rev Z and I to get together, take a look at where New Thought's headed in the future, and often have some inspiring interviews. Now, if you tuned in today and you're expecting to see Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller with us, well, we apologize. She is not with us, and as far as we know, everything's fine. Just a cross of wires and across the communications, it looks like. So we'll do everything to reschedule her again in the near future as we are able. However, that means that, well, Z, we get to make it up as we go along today.
I agree, and so we're going to do a old football 32-49 shift, and then we're gonna punt. So so it's gonna work just fine. It's gonna work fine.
You remind me of a thing I heard when I was a kid. My uncle was a big fan, he was a big fan of Notre Dame. And other folks were a big fan of the Nittany Lions, Penn State, and they would bust on the Irish, right, on Notre Dame, and the phrase was up the middle, pass, punt, up the middle, pass, punt. And that was, now this probably was in the early 70s or so. And they would say, that was their game plan. That was how the Irish played there at Notre Dame. Up the middle, pass, punt. So
I'll have to remember that one. I like it.
I think we're probably in good company today.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But
well, and
folks, if you're watching, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and we just had a holy weekend that just passed. There was Passover, Easter, and Ramadan all going on at the same time. So, set the tone.
And I learned this. I guess intuitively, I think I had always known this, but that alignment only happens once every 33 years. That's a 33-year cycle where Ramadan, Passover, and Easter all fall together at the same time. And interestingly enough, that's how old Jesus was when he was crucified, was 33. So,
and that's an interesting feat because for Passover and Ramadan, they're based on a lunar calendar, right? I mean, because next time Ramadan will be 2 weeks earlier. Right, because Ramadan eventually goes through every month of the year.
Yep, and I think I've watched you experience and celebrate and honor Ramadan each of those months throughout since we've known each other. I think we're coming up on a full cycle, as it may be. So where are? Tell us a little. That's a great subject, and that's a great topic because let's go there. Maybe we've told this story publicly or not, but one of the very first introduction LZ and I had to each other included him professing how he was going to raise the flag of Islam in New Thought. And I know I've told you since then that I was scared shitless in that moment, mostly because I didn't know what I was getting into. But I've also told you that I have watched you do that. And I think I've watched you do that masterfully during our friendship and over the years now. And you do that in a way that helps New Thought um, be less scared, be less intimidated, let's say, have a cleaner or clearer understanding of the principles of Islam and how that fits with New Thought. So seeing as how we didn't schedule or plan any of this, there you go. There's your prompt. Take that, my friend.
Well, yeah, that's a good prompt. Well, it's interesting because it has often been said that Islam is the most misunderstood religion in the world because it has been, projected as this anti-everything that just wants to kill and so forth. But when you get beyond all of the media and all of the stereotypes and all of that, you find out, which some people know, that it is part of the monotheistic Abrahamic faith tradition, and that when other than a few nuances, and some of those nuances are major, but other than that, the precepts are the same, right? I mean, so like I was talking with someone the other day, and I made a mention that to be a Muslim, you have to believe in all the prophets from Abraham all the way down. And they said, "Oh, Jesus and Moses and Aaron." I mean, and says, "Yes, you have to believe in all of them. And then if you don't believe in one of them, then you can't profess yourself to be a Muslim." And so it's just so misunderstood when people can get behind some of that rhetoric of fanatics, right? Who take the faith, who take the words and shift them and twist them and mold them to fit their individual purposes. Not much different than what we have now with some of the right wing we have now, how they're confirming and twisting. And I mean, when you look at the origins of the KKK, the origins of the KKK is out of the Bible.
Right.
So any tradition, any ideology or faith can be, hijacked, if you will. And, and that's what has happened in Islam. It just happened more on a global scale and with a lot of destruction in between all of that. And so, unfortunately, Islam doesn't get that same benefit of the doubt until you go behind the scenes.
Yeah, or respect, I would even say, doesn't get the respect. And it, to me, it seems pretty straightforward. The Western Christian radicals, if you will, or the extremists in Western Christianity needed a good foil, needed a good enemy.
Yes.
And men with beards and turbans and all the finery
fit the purpose
of being a Muslim fit the purpose, and it became very easy for us to make you the bad guys.
Yeah.
As it were.
Because and a lot of people always ask me, well, as a Muslim, how do you consider yourself to be? I as Robert and I've talked about frequently, I consider myself to be an Islamic religious scientist. Because when I first got introduced to Ernest Holman and religious science, the first thing that stood out to me was Ernest's words. He's not here to create a new religion. He says, "I'm here to educate people about the golden thread that runs through all the religions." And so when I started listening and studying religious science, to me, it appeared, and it still does, as very similar to a Sufi order, a more mystical, more metaphysical interpretation or outlet of the divine scripture. And so from that point, I was like, okay, I'm in. And I didn't see any contradiction. Now, I'm sure there are tons of people who would beg to differ. And if we want to go down that path, we can go. But that, for me, it was an easy transition.
Right. Well, and that's the beauty of philosophizing, of philosophy, right? Is we're allowed to have different opinions and different perspectives. And for the most part, the process, the idea is to have a respectful conversation and talk about it and be it not in, I don't even like the word debate, but to be in that discussion that says, okay, so how do you answer this question then? Or what does that say about this? And have that back and forth that in some ways seems to, well, I'll say it straight out, folks, in a lot of ways is missing, especially in the North American culture right now. We love to get into our little echo chambers and we love to have people agree with us, and can't stand it if somebody doesn't agree with us. And if somebody doesn't, well, then I can either call you a name or just take my typewriter and run home and pretend it never happened. But I like the term Islamic religious scientist, because that's what got me into it. That concept of being a scientist about the religions of the world, a scientist. Now, all right, I haven't published any double-blind studies on with peer-reviewed papers, but I've done my own work to come and say, to be able to say, hey, this matches, this fits, and obviously that's true for you as well.
Most definitely, and I think you know, I think one of the brilliant things about Ernest Holmes and his teachings and his whole approach was to say, look, I mean, he studied Hinduism, he studied some Buddhism, he studied some of the mystical traditions of various individuals during the time of enlightenment. And he found that although they may have come in different vehicles, if you will, they all led to the same place, and you had to get out of those vehicles to walk through the building of the sacred. And so, you know, for me, that was key because, you know, growing up in religion, you see how, you know, that's used as a wedge. It's used to block people off as opposed to bring them together. And so once you can get beyond that and you get a little experience and you see that, oh, this is quite different from the reality, from what's being taught, then if you're sincerely looking to be more in tune with the universe, if you will, you go out on a journey on your own. And that's that rites of passage, that holy quest to go out and answer these questions for yourself so that you can be categorically, as they say, have a personal relationship with the divine. And I don't need to, at that point, get too contradictory with what somebody else says. I touch into my heart, and then I can find a way.
Yep. And to me, that's the, I can point at the moon and I can tell you what the moon looks like to me, and I can tell you what the moon does for me, but I can't tell you how to experience the moon.
No.
I cannot force you to see it through my eyes, and I can't possibly expect you to. Now, a lot of people do, right? You got to do it my way, man. But the bigger truth is, it's just not possible. So it leads me to that question: how do I deepen my relationship with the divine? How, for me, I know there are. The visioning process, really good music. There's a number of different ways that I deepen my relationship with the divine, and right, what you've taught me over the last probably close to 15 years now or so is that all of what we had in Christianity or in New Thought or in Islam, they're just different versions, a different channel, a different program on how to get there.
Without a doubt. And I think, you know, for those individuals that are, as I call them, seekers, those guys and gals who are not afraid to go outside the bounds, to read material from other traditions, to, you know, try and experience life in a different way and maybe according to a different tradition or a different philosophy. it's like, you know, I can describe to you, as you were just saying, I can describe to you what a mango tastes like, but you're never going to understand it until you taste it.
Right.
And it's going to be very difficult for you to have an opinion about it until you taste it. Now, once you taste it, you can say, oh, I like it, I don't like it, it's too sweet, it's too stringy, this, that, and the other. And then I can say, oh, there's variations of mango, right? So there's like a couple hundred different types of mango, as I understand it. So it's the same thing with life. And you know, some people like cornflakes and some people like Cheerios. But you know, there's a different experience. But they're both going to give you some nutrition and guide you to a healthy living if you don't overdo it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You had mentioned Easter, and it must be a very rich time for you as a minister in a pulpit to have an Easter celebration service when you identify as an Islamic New Thoughter, right? And a religious scientist. And I never had that rich Christian experience or upbringing or background. So for me, Easter truly was like, you know, hey, what are we doing in the morning to get some candy? And then later in life, what am I doing in the afternoon to have a couple of beers and some ham for dinner, you know? And, but in the role I now serve, I had an opportunity to provide a talk on Sunday to a community remotely. And what we did is we went and looked at, okay, let's take this apart a little differently. If there hadn't have been a Judas, there wouldn't have been an Easter. There hadn't have been a Judas, there wouldn't have been a crucifixion. So let's stop making that part of the story wrong or bad. Let's look at, okay, there is somebody who was trying for whatever reason to gain one up on the system, to allow their ego to move them, however we metaphysically want to look at it. And it was absolutely vital to the story. And it's absolutely vital to what comes next. So we all have that in our lives. And there are the witnesses, the Marys that come to the tomb with herbs and oils to anoint Jesus's body after the crucifixion. Those are the witnesses that we need in our lives as our own transformation. And there is the angel that rolls away the tomb, that moves the barriers so we can transform into a new consciousness, into a new way of being. It provides for some rich dialogue when we can take ourselves out of our traditional upbringing perspective and look at these stories and cultural pieces from a whole new perspective.
Yeah, and you know, as you said, for me, it's a obstacle course walking that line between Islam and Christian, because from an Islamic standpoint, there was no crucifixion, right?
Right.
And so when I look at that, I have to look at it in a metaphysical approach, right? So, you know, I can take every symbol of Christ and Easter and everything, and there's a metaphysical meaning, as you was just kind of articulating. The crucifixion or the cross is the cross between a decision. What decision are you going to make in terms of how you will interact and establish a relationship for the divine? So a lot of people are always stuck on the cross. They are being crucifixed because they won't make a choice. They don't make decisions about how they're going to do this or that. And so that's just one interpretation of the crucifixion. And then you look at the whole thing about the stone. It's like, what is blocking your consciousness? What is blocking your spirit from having a connection to be resurrected into idea that you are an emanation of the Most High God, and that you are able to do these kinds of things that Jesus said, that the things that I do, you can do these and more, once you allow the spirit to come fully in. And so, you know, very, very clearly, right in the Quran, in the verse, the second chapter, first couple of sentences, it says, in this book, meaning the Quran, there are verses that are plain and fundamental, and then there are verses that are allegorical or metaphysical, or you know, that are in that kind of thing. So there are certain things that are plain and clear, and there are certain things that gives you this opportunity to tap into the divine and the divine inspiration and intuition and be directed by the divine.
Mm. Folks, if you wonder what you've stumbled into here, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. My co-host, Reverend Elzia, and I are here every Tuesday. We're going to take a quick break, let a couple of our sponsors and other organizations say hello, and grab a sip of water for ourselves. And we're going to be right back with more, so stay with us. And coming up in the next segment, as promised, we're going to bring in our special guest, Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller is going to be with us for a bit here today, so we were able to get her into the studio. So stay tuned. Let us say hello to our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a shake of it. Well, I'm not going to say that. That's an old idea. We're going to take a break. We'll be back soon. Stay with us.
Let's do something fun. Let's go on vacation. Let's take some time off just to do something fun with none of the usual to-do list that we have to deal with from day to day. And let's do it right now. And it'll only take a few seconds. Take a deep breath. Let it out. Take a break. Give yourself the gift of a moment. Allow yourself to stop doing and simply be. Because you are a bright light of love, and for you, being is more than enough.
And we're back with more of the New Thought Today on New Thought Media Network. I'm Rev Robert. My co-host, Reverend Elzia Sekou, is with me today. And I'm going to take responsibility for somehow miscommunicating the time zones and the time changes and all the things that happen. So we're really grateful. Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller was able to drop in and still caught up with us. Thank you.
Love those ads. Those were great.
Thank you. And Dr. Ruth, you were with us last August, so welcome back. Really grateful to have you on the show today. We didn't have a chance to go over the normal questions that we like to ask everybody, and Reverend Elzia and I have gotten into this really deep conversation around the unique experience of Ramadan and Passover and Easter all falling on the same weekend. And what we do know is that this only happens every 33 years.
Yes.
And we'd love to, I know you've been down this road before, so we'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the nexus of what's happening when something like this goes on in the world.
Oh, you're marvelous. Thank you. Yeah, I did 2 Sunday talks yesterday in 2 different places, and both of them were on this very thing, right? Isn't it? I mean, when I think of the billions of people who are focusing on their relationship with the divine, and there were 2 common things in everybody's experience that are kind of themes. And one is freedom. There is a freedom from the bindings of the past in all of this. And I don't know if you noticed that Saturday was also Wesak. It was the anniversary of the Buddha's awakening. right? So this weekend, oh my goodness, right? So much power toward freedom and freedom from that which had kept us limited in distress in the past. And then as we look at the other piece of it, all of these were in many ways acts of resistance by simply flowing with the inner process against what had been normal. And isn't that what's happening today in our world? Isn't that what we are? So to think that not just Christians, not just Jews, not just Muslims, not just Buddhists, but all of us together are experiencing that all at once. It has to have been a major turning point in human history.
Yeah, Doc, that's interesting. You just put 2-3 light bulbs in my head because one thing that it symbolizes for me is this whole idea of everybody having to reawaken, however you're doing it, through prayer, through fasting, through celebration, whatever that is, but to reawaken to the divine idea that there's oneness, there's harmony, there's unity. And if we continue down the path that we're on, it will be more and more difficult to achieve that. Not that it can't be achieved, but if we don't awaken to that idea, it'll be a harder journey than we need it to be, I think.
And I think, if you buy into morphogenetic fields at all, this weekend made it very easy to wake up to the idea. Yeah, because there was so much energy. There has been, there will be even over the next few days as, Passover completes, as Ramadan completes. But I'm also doing a talk at the end of the month on Earth Day. And for me, they're all tied together. It's as if we've got a 2-week period here, or 3-week, if you come from the full moon, which was the beginning of the Wiccan celebration, right? And that we can add those into our billions of people, right? So we've got everybody all the way through Earth Day going, wow, look what's possible. And we're not stuck with what has been.
And it's interesting. The theme for Centers for Spiritual Living, the theme for the month is the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And what better time to be vulnerable when the morphic fields, when the divine energy, when the alignment of all things good are open, right?
Right on.
There is a day. It's one of the latter days, the odd days of Ramadan, called Laylat al-Qadr, which is the night of power. That is the night that the first revelation was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. And so during that time, it's encouraged that you stay up all night, basically praying, right?
Yep.
So that you are vulnerable, so that when that light comes, that you are a receiver of it and has the ability to transform you and anybody you come in contact with. So it's a wonderful thing to be talking about this right now. Sometimes things slip your mind, but you brought it right to point that now is, as they say, now is the time and this is the hour. We see all kinds of things going on all around the world in all arenas. And so it is a time for those who have any inkling of the spirit rising to wake up to it and to come together in a sense of vulnerability, meaning that we know the divine is in control, but when I open my heart and I get rid of this fear and I'm just open, all things are possible.
That's fabulous. And when you said that, I was reminded that in the Christian tradition, Jesus the night before the crucifixion is in the garden. He's done the Passover ceremony, including all the words that include do this remembrance of me. It's part of the Passover Haggadah. And he's gone through this and he's sent Judas on his way to do whatever he's going to do. And when I was growing up in kind of outside, but on the edges of the Christian tradition, I was taught that he sweat blood and saying, not thy will, but mine, not my will, but thine be done, and that is so vulnerable. Well, in the Course in Miracles, lesson 101, and I remember this because I've been living on Highway 101 for most of my life.
I love it.
Lesson 101 is God's will for me is my perfect happiness and fulfillment. And so on the cross, that man is there going, it is complete. It is fulfilled. It is done. Yes. And there's a point, there's an Aramaic phrase that he used, Eli, Eli, Yani sabachthani, right? And it's been misinterpreted. It's been translated into the Hebrew quote in the prophet of Daniel, where Daniel has said, Lord, Lord, why have you forsaken me? But in the Aramaic, it means, for this was I born. For this is my fulfillment. Isn't it marvelous? This is why I am here, to accomplish this.
And earlier we were talking about the symbolism of the crucifixion, because from an Islamic perspective, it is stated that it wasn't Christ on the cross. Not that somebody didn't get crucified, but it wasn't Christ on the cross. It was someone in his likeness who was on the cross.
And the Gnostic tradition supports that.
And so what that symbol makes, especially given in light what the Aramaic says, is that whole idea of having to make a choice and then surrendering. You're at this crucifixion, you're at this cross point, and you have to make a decision to where you want to live or not, if you will, whether you want to go forward or not, to whether you want to aspire to higher or not. And when Jesus said, in this particular situation, basically, your will, not my will, be done.
Right.
That's ultimate vulnerability and openness to the divine.
Exactly. And what helped me so much was the realization that that the divine will is always our fulfillment, always our fullest expression of who we can be. That is the divine will. So if I've been stuck in my thoughts about the past, if I've been stuck in my beliefs about who I have to be, the divine will is that I break out of that and become free in fulfillment.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it when the plan come together. It's just so beautiful.
I can relate to that.
and it's unfortunate that we see some of the activity going on over in Jerusalem, right? A holy site for all three traditions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and we look at all of the destruction that's currently going on, and it's but I think again it should ignite a spark in everyone to say this seems wrong to me. This seems crazy to me that we're allowing this to go into a sacred site and to start disrupting life with bombs and all kinds of things. And you got tourists. I mean, why? For what? And so I think it's an opportunity, as you said, Doc, to really begin for those, as it says in the Bible, those who have eyes, let them see, and those who have ears, let them hear, that this is a time for us to drop the labels.
Yep.
Because that's all they are, labels.
Yep.
And tap into the underlying consciousness, the underlying spirit that is foundation on love and respect for all humans, all life, all things really, and say, how do we better reflect the divine?
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm thinking of my grandmother, and I'm thinking of Thomas Troward. My grandmother was in India right after Thomas Troward left India, and they were both in the same part of India, in the Punjab. And in the Punjab, you got everybody. You got Sikhs and Jains and Hindus and Buddhists and Jews and Christians and Muslims, and it's everybody all trying to live together, right? And back at the beginning of the last century, when they were both there, Troward learned as much as he could of the different languages and the different traditions so that he could be a magistrate, right? Trying to balance all of these things and deal with the issues. And he was very powerful and very effective in that, and came back and he wrote about what you're talking about. The core of all of them is that the creative process of all that is working in and through us. Yes?
Yes.
And that the word is how that becomes manifest. Well, my grandmother didn't have that approach. She went over as a young woman Methodist missionary. She was going to help those poor people in India. And she got it very quickly that they didn't need her help. But she did help them a bit. She gave young mothers tools so that they could form daycare centers so that the moms could wash their saris and things like that. Mm-hmm. And she ended up working with Gandhi to some extent. But what she came back with was the realization that we're all headed to the same peak, mountain peak, but we're all taking different paths. And sometimes those paths cross, and sometimes they seem like they're going down, but they're all going to that peak. And that peak is what we're talking about, that divine will for our fulfillment individually and collectively. And there's a guy named Henry Drummond who was the generation before that. He was comparable to Emerson and Hopkins and Mary Baker Eddy. He was in that era. And he was up in Scotland, a natural history professor who also was a Thomas Moody missionary to the wharf people, the people working on the wharves. And he was convinced that Spirit is reaching down to bring us up into full expression of spirit, even as we have been reaching into the animal and plant and material kingdoms, as he called them, to become at full expression as humans, right? And now Spirit is pulling us up to become full expression in spirit. And, that was the book that Ernest Holmes grew up on, Natural Law, Spiritual Law in the Natural World. Henry Drummond, Spiritual Law in the I wrote it up as one law. But that idea is so powerful when we can allow it, be vulnerable to the potential that is here in us working, and just allow that past to no longer determine who and what our experience must be. Yes?
Yes.
Thoughts for a new one. Yes.
And I want to jump on that analogy of the mountain for a moment, because what I love about that is, yes, there are hundreds, thousands of different paths up the mountain. But at a certain point, if you're witnessing people climbing a mountain, you don't know what path they came up. Because when you get to the top, it's just one long line of people. And mountain climbers will tell you this: at a certain point, it doesn't matter whose team you were on, what base camp you came from last night, or where you got your last cup of tea. We're all in line together.
I love it. And that is marvelous.
And I can't get there if you don't.
The Bodhisattva vow.
And by you getting there, and by you taking the next step is available for me. And by me taking the next step, as you're saying, the next step is available for those that are coming as well. So my love of this past weekend is that I have to believe we created an energetic vibration where we start to look beyond the separations and start to really see. And those that aren't even looking can feel the power of the oneness saying, I don't know what this is, but I want some of it. I want more of it. Right. I don't know what you got, but I want more of it.
Right.
And what we've got is oneness.
Well, Dr. Ruth brought it back to mind, back in the day, so to speak, they had this concept called natural religion.
Yep.
Right. And natural religion took into account everything. Right. And some people call it, they're into animism. People label things that they don't understand or things that they're afraid of, all these crazinesses, so that they can, not have to deal. But but when you had this idea of a natural religion, the cycles and the rhythms and the frequency of the divine that permeate throughout the universe were respected, and people put themselves in right relationship so that they all work together. And when you were talking about your grandmother in the Punjab, I think it took my mind to this idea of where different traditions work together. If we look at Moorish Spain, right, starting from 1000 BC up into the time of Columbus, basically, there Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived in Alhambra and those different regions of were the most noted. but they had worked together to create libraries and public baths, and women could go to schools, and all the things that were needed to have a whole society were there. Now people said, oh, there was this, that, and the other. All right, well, there's gonna always be this, that, and the other. But when you look at the accomplishment and the harmony that was there, until seeds of doubt, until seeds of jealousy and greed were supplanted by someone foreign to the idea, that's what disrupted. And after that happened, the rest of the world, when they killed that, it went into what they call, and I didn't call it this, they did, the Dark Ages, right? Where there was just no light, there was no understanding, there was no compromise for the humanity of everybody.
Yeah. One of my favorite characters is a man named Fulbert, who grew up in that world and learned enough in that world that he was able to, through the priesthood in the Catholic tradition and through influence over a man that he helped become Pope, establish at Chartres, the town of Chartres in France, a learning center based on what was happening in that part of the world. And it was a learning center in which people were taught, first of all, the basic Greek liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, arithmetic, music, a little astronomy, and all of that, be able to compose poetry, etc. That's the basic level. And all second sons and some first sons were sent to this place, right? And when they graduated, then they were invited to go the second level. And the second level was, believe it or not, astrology. You took arithmetic and geometry and astronomy and put it together with an understanding of poetry and music. And you understood that as above, so below, that there is a direct relationship, not causal, not that what's out there is causing here, but that it's the same thing, mirroring, right? So that was what I call a master's degree at Chartres from Fulbert, who learned it in that community you're talking about, right? Well, he went on, and there is a third level that was offered at Chartres as part of the Christian teaching, right? And that was alchemy. You had a doctorate when you learned as within, so without. As without, so within. And Chartres was the primary learning institution for Christians from about 900 AD to 1225 AD, when Thomas Aquinas' ideas and the University of Paris and the Dominicans, who actually were the people who undid what was going on in Moorish Spain, all became the dominant movement in the church. But for 300 years, those ideas that were prevalent and being taught in Moorish Spain were available to all Europeans who were willing to be part of the Chartres community. And it moved, and it was marvelous.
And I love that. I love that because, when we go back, if we go back and we look, and now we're going to go backwards in time, and we go back and look at ancient Egypt, and we look at the whole tradition of the Kabbalion, not the Kabbalah, but the Kabbalion. And the principles that are taught there are frequency and vibration and rhythm and polarity and correspondence. We begin to see that out of those things, and gender, which did not mean gender as we look at it, male, female, it meant gender in terms of opposites, right? Yep. When you set the capstone on that, of that all is mental or all is mind or all is consciousness, you begin to look at these 7 principles, and you can devise anything by putting them together. If I put rhythm and correspondence together, I get a certain law. If I put rhythm and a frequency together, there's a whole nother thing that happens. And so you begin to see that how they were able to take from the abstract to the actuality. And what we call now, we live by principles. And so these principles are vast, they're broad, and we can extract. And Robert, my favorite is, there's the principle of electricity, but I can get electricity through fossil fuel, solar, turbine, hydro, All
You can get it from static.
exactly, and they're different but same. At some point, where you were saying about the mountain, they may have come up a different path, but at one point they all converge and produce electricity.
Mm-hmm. Hey, folks, if you wonder what you've stumbled in here to today, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. We need to take a quick break. However, before we do, wanted to give a big shout out to dear friend, Reverend Laura Topper. As you were talking about Chart and her, no wonder the labyrinth is there. Exactly. I was thinking very much the same thing. And we always like to give Reverend Laura a big shout out because I wouldn't have known of you, Dr. Ruth, if it hadn't have been for Laura.
And I wouldn't have known about you if it hadn't been for her either. She is a marvelous gatekeeper.
Exactly. So really grateful that you bounced into the program today, Lauren, that you're with us. We're going to take a real quick break, just over a minute, to say thank you to our donors and our sponsors. Let everyone here grab a little sip of water, but don't go away. We've got more coming. We'll be right back with more of New Thought Today and our special guest, Reverend Dr. Ruth Miller. Stay tuned. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Thank you again to all of our donors and sponsors. If you'd like to get involved and be part of the financial stewardship of this ministry and support getting this message out all over the planet, far and wide, please head on over to our website, ntmedia.org. Click on that donate button and make it a monthly donation. We'll get your name on the next version of our video there. And there's the banner that I was looking for. Great. All right. Now, we've got just about 10 minutes left, and I know that's not going to be anywhere near enough time to cover what we want to cover. But Dr. Ruth, we on this program, we love to look at where New Thought's going. And so that's the big question. Like, how does this philosophy of New Thought, how can it influence the future of our planet and climate change, of our politics, of our personal relationships, of all the things that are going on in the world? It's great to know how we got here, but we really like to explore where's this all taken us. And I know you have quite a vocabulary on this topic, let's say. So give us what you think we need to know.
Oh, you're marvelous. Thank you. So, yeah, from having been a futurist for several decades, it is kind of how I think. I used to say, well, you know, my lifespan goes from about 3000 BC to about 3000 AD. Or for new people, BCE and CE. So the process we're in right now, we are literally, I said, this could have been the tipping point. This weekend could be the tipping point where people, because of the nature of consciousness, because of the nature of the field effect, where people really do begin to actually wake up and live from a new level of consciousness. I think that the New Thought teachings, principles, presence has made a huge difference in building up to this point. And I think that the principles of New Thought will be fundamental to the culture that is emerging around us. Now, not everyone may realize that it's New Thought, They may think that it's someone else entirely, and they may just see, oh my goodness, look how this works, in the same way that our teachers did, right? And they discovered it for themselves and passed it on. Hopkins and Holmes and all those marvelous people. So as we look at the way that the major institutions are falling apart worldwide, as we look at the fact that the population growth curve is actually evening out and is starting to go downward over the next several decades, because birth rates are decreasing and because the various things that are happening in climate change are going to increase the number of people who pass on and leave the planet, which was foreseeable. Those of us who were doing this work 50 years ago told everybody about it, and nobody chose to do anything because short-term profit was seen as more important than long-term thriving. And so part of what is happening is people are waking up to that. I'm aware that in the US today, as I understand it, 11 million working age men are not going for jobs. They are doing other things. Now, some of them, it's true, have become addicted to video games, but most of them are finding other ways to be fulfilled in the process of supporting themselves and their families. Right. And I think that's part of what New Thought has brought to the fore. As I scan YouTube, as I scan the various news feeds, many people are saying it doesn't have to be the way it was. You can be fulfilled. You can experience a life of fulfillment. And many of them are offering basic New Thought principles and techniques along the way, some of them having different names for it. So that's where we are. Now, what's likely to unfold in this? We have two ways, okay? I am very much convinced, based on personal experience and observation, that as people enter into a powerfully loving relationship with the divine as expressed through nature, the physical environment around them becomes more healthy. The gardens are better. Finhorn established that. The weather, the climate, the microclimates, everything work for the well-being of those who are in harmony with them. Shamanism, that's the essence of being a shaman, is to have the community and the individuals be in harmony with the natural world around them so that everybody thrives, right? And that, I think, is becoming part of the New Thought thinking as well. It's just emerging in it. But as more and more people enter into this state of consciousness, we will see a shift. Now, one of the ways I'm seeing the global climate change is the equatorial band is expanding both directions.
Yes.
Now, there is a lot of really good life on the equatorial band. It just happens there's a lot of deserts too. And people are beginning to turn those deserts around. I don't know if you've been seeing the work that's being done on the edges of Sahara, but oh my goodness, they are restoring all kinds of desert. And in Arizona and a lot of other places, I follow the regenerative agriculture and permaculture movements that have just blossomed in the last 50 years. So all of that is happening. And as people are shifting their relationship internally and then acting from that, we are going to see more and more heavenly places, more and more gardens of Eden, more and more incredibly, wonderfully balanced ways of living in smaller communities, not in large urban centers. If we go back to the past, urban centers are a function of hierarchy control. If you stop doing that, you start getting networks of small communities. And so my book Home is about what that could look like, but it's also what some of the people who are doing the quote remote viewing of the future are actually seeing, Stefan Schwartz being one of the leaders in that movement. So then the other piece that I'm seeing is people then turning in towards their smaller communities. And I think New Thought centers, whether they're for spiritual living or unity or whatever, are becoming cores for those communities. And they may go out and live geographically slightly away from those, but they are encouraging people to interact and be mutually supportive. There's a thing called the Post-Growth Institute, and they're offering something they call offers and needs markets. And the idea is that people can offer what it is that is their gift to give, whatever it is, physically and whatever. And people who have an opening for something can put it out. And that's building community. I'm having that happen in 2 or 3 of the congregations I work with now. So there's all kinds of ways that people shifting their consciousness through the principles and processes we call New Thought are actually helping them to behave in a way that means that the global climate change may actually end up being a Garden of Eden for everyone.
I love that idea.
and Doc, we have to get some time together just to spawn, because you just spawned so much. Because a couple of things that came up. One, and I know our time is getting short, so I'm going to go quick. It would be lovely to have a New Thought think tank where we had New Thought practitioners, if you will, from all the traditions and shamanism, the whole deal, New Age, if you will. Some people don't like that term, but it is a New Age. And come together to vision where we're going and how these principles dovetail together and how they all work together and how we've separated them. Shamanism and astrology and astronomy and spirituals, and we've separated because we had this whole separation of church and state. The divine is one. Bring them back together. Magic will happen.
I'd be happy to do an afternoon at the ANTN meeting in October on just that.
Ooh.
And you're going to be there, I believe, because
I'm all registered.
We're the media providers, and I'm pretty sure I saw your name in the official planning type stuff. So
when is that date? October what?
It's the first week in October. It's at Unity Village.
The 2nd through the 7th. So
Okay.
2nd through the 6th.
6. All right. Yeah. So yeah, let's get that rumor started. And you know, the last thing, when you're talking about the microbiomes and things, at one time, according to geologists and anthropologists and all of those studies, the Sahara Desert used to be a garden.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Our Great Plains is a mini version of what used to be the Sahara. The Gobi Desert used to be a forest. Remember the cedars of Lebanon? That was normal. Empire destroyed those things. We need to restore them in small communities, focused on a consciousness of oneness with each other, with the all that is, and with this universal natural space that gives us everything.
Yes. Oh, I love it.
Amen. Hey, woman. Hey, yeah. I love this conversation. And you know, folks, this is why we originally had Dr. Ruth scheduled for the whole hour. Again, my apologies for that. But I've got some ideas on how we can get you back on the program again real soon. And I think I see this concept of a New Thought think tank in the works. What do you folks think out there watching? Is that something you'd like to see? Is that something you'd like to support? Let us know. Send an email, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. We'd be happy to make sure that we listen to what you're sharing there. And before we go, I just want to say it not only is it a pleasure to be in your company, and I gained so much just by listening to these conversations. And the last point I think that I know I heard in there is New Thought did its work to help us become better people. The entry point is self-help, is you can heal your life. You can create the life you desire. But the exit, if you will, or the next evolution is how do we do that on the global scale, not for ourselves, but for the collective, for the commons.
For the collective, for ourselves and the collective.
Exactly. And so it's wonderful to have you sharing your wisdom and your vision so that we can do exactly that. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you so much for including me and putting up with me.
Folks,
Big hugs to all of you. I'll look forward to the next time.
yes, we're going to get out of here for now. But however, I do encourage you, head over to the website, ntmedia.org, click on the attend tab, and you're going to find in that event list a whole bunch of ways that you can find out more about the affiliated New Thought Network's annual retreat at Unity Village this year in October. And come hang out and sit at the feet of a master like Reverend Dr. Ruth.
Aw,
I
thank
promise
you, dear.
you'll have a good time. Until next time, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.